Do you like seeing stuff more than not seeing stuff? I know I do. If so, then check out tnvc.com for all your seeing stuff needs, because we'll be seeing you tonight.
Howdy, folks. I'm Jeff Gonzalez, former Navy SEAL, founder of Trident Concepts, and host of the Bulletproof Workshop, powered by AR15.com, where we discuss knowledge, skills, and ability to help bulletproof your everyday performance in whatever your field or passion. Welcome to podcast 043. My next guest is described as a firebrand conservative, retired military officer, and political representative in 2 states. He comes from a long line of combat veterans and served in both Iraq wars. After leaving the military, he pursued political ambitions, serving as congressman for Florida and chairman of the Texas Republican Party. During what little downtime, he managed to author not 1, but 3 books. His love of firearms and freedom led him to Watchtower Firearms, where he's on the advisory board. He's an avid moto rider, master diver, ROTC Hall of Fame inductee, Tennessee volunteer, and grandfather to a preemie baby. Please welcome to the show, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West.
Jeff, it's great to be here with you. Good to see you again.
Thank you, sir. It's been a while. I'm excited. I have been looking forward to this one for a long time.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. I want to get right into it. Normally I have like show notes and things that I like to follow through, but with everything that's been happening in the country, I can't wait to kind of hear some of your observations about what's really, really going on. We had some nice off-camera conversations about the unintended consequences of, for lack of a better term, political correctness and how far it's really gone. How do we right this? How do we right the ship and get it back on course? What's some things that we can be doing?
Well, I think it's so important that it starts in the home, and parents have to reassert their authority in the home. And the big challenge now is when you hear a president and the first lady and the vice president and the White House spokesperson saying that your children are not yours.
Yes.
You know, that's an affront to you.
Oh, my God.
And the recent issue 1 that passed in Ohio basically says that parents do not have to be notified if their child wants to go out and murder their baby in the womb. Parents do not have to be notified if their child decides that they want to undergo a gender mutilation surgery. So we are losing the ability to, as it says in Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way that they should go.
Right.
So that when they grow old, they shall not depart from it. The government is coming in saying that we own your child.
Yeah.
And if you go back, you see that Adolf Hitler parroted the same type of rhetoric. Lenin, Stalin, Chairman Mao, all of these socialist leftist dictators did that. And so I think that reasserting the strong family role. But then also, we came up with that stupid thing called a participation trophy. You know what I'm talking about?
I do. The Juice Box Award.
Yeah, we thought that we could help a kid's self-esteem by giving them a trinket.
Yeah.
And so now you have a generation that is growing up and they're still looking for a participation trophy.
Yeah.
I can't take it if you talk to me mean. What do you mean I made an F on this test? We have to change the grading standards and all of this. Well, maybe we shouldn't have an LSAT. We shouldn't have SATs. Everyone should just be able to go and participate in whatever they want to do. So I think those are some basic fundamentals that we have to get back to. But I'm encouraged when I see parents now paying attention to what I think is the most important elected position in the country. That's school board.
Well, there's 2 things that I want to unravel there. First, it baffles me that there is the movement to strip parents of their rights to raise the children in the way that they see fit. Now, putting aside anything that's legally questionable, whatever the case might be, as far as abuse and whatnot, that's a different story. But I feel as though the government really has opened up a can of worms with that, and it really
huge.
And the problem is that they have emboldened the children now to be more rebellious. And now there is this, when you talk about trying to reclaim ownership of the parenting role, it's really hard. It's kind of like pushing back against, this. There is a difference between the rebellious streaks that we all go through and the continued undermining of the roles that parents have. So one of the things that I have observed, and you see this when you talk about the school boards, and I never thought about it, but it makes absolute sense. The most important job, most valuable job in our country, the board of educators, because they are educating the future.
Yes.
And that is, and it's always been something that's so important to me. I mean, I think about it from, our constitutional rights, our freedoms, our liberties, all this stuff. How are we ensuring that they are going to be entrusted the stewardship of those rights to the next generation? The fear that I have is that, again, this is all part of the bigger agenda, the bigger goals. So when you talk about reclaiming the parenting roles, what are some, I am very lucky. I'm kind of outside of the parenting aspects. I shouldn't say I'm lucky. I have, I guess, matured to the point where now my children are young adults, and they still require a lot of guidance, and I'm so happy to be in that position. But the younger parents, the struggling that they have as far as dealing with, they're getting pushback from the schools, they're getting pushback from the social media influence, they're getting pushback from all these things. What seems to me to be reasonable, hey, limit the amount of time that the children have to work on their phones, limit the amount of time that they have to play on their video games. All of these things, like back when I was a kid, that was non-negotiable. I just basically,
I wanted to be outside.
Yeah, well, there's that. There's that too.
We didn't have all that
I
stuff.
know. That was the other thing I thought of. When we talked about this, I can't necessarily say when I was a kid, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to be with my friends. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be doing athletic activities. If you had to put your finger on one valuable piece of advice to give those parents, the struggling parents, about what they can do to try to reclaim the position of parenting in their household, what would that be?
I think that, and I'm a recent grandparent 2 times over. You as a grandparent have to stay engaged and involved.
I love that.
Okay.
Yes.
You just can't say, okay, done. You have to continue to teach, coach, and mentor. And you have to continue to have these conversations with your children. I don't care how old they are. My 2 daughters are 30 and 27.
Nice.
And, I share with them stories about education and things that are happening. I share with them stories about, the sexualization of children. We have discussions about these things so that they can be aware of it. And my wife and I are involved with them. And you still have to, you may not be at the tactical level.
Yeah.
But you can be at the operational level.
I love how your brain is thinking.
You see, and maybe later on you get up at the strategic level, but you still have to have some type of oversight of this battlefield.
Yes.
That your children are in right now, because they really don't know. There are so many experiences that you can share with them, and so much insight that you can share with them. It's kind of like the old Spartans. I mean, every young Spartan warrior had a Spartan mentor. Yeah. And I think that's what grandparents have to continue to do.
Well, I am not a grandparent yet, but I've already, my better half and I are already excited about that opportunity, because it also gives us the opportunity to do it again.
Yes. And better.
Exactly.
Better. I'm telling you.
That's the things, like, I have a laundry list of what I screwed up. Okay, these are the things that I'm going to try to help. And what I liked about it, what you said, is the discussion.
Yeah.
Because they're their own entities at this point. The ability to govern or parent is no longer on the table. But being able to discuss and have those types of conversations, and if for nothing else, just to plant that seed, just to kind of give them a different perspective. Well, that works. That sounds good. But have you thought about this?
Yeah.
And I feel like I was out of the household when I was very young, 18. I was underway already, and I kind of missed that. In my mentors were all my sea daddies, basically. And what they were mentoring on was war fighting, per se. So I didn't really get that parenting. I mean, I got a parenting from a different perspective. And so I kind of missed out on that. And so, but when I see families that have that extension, that the full nuclear family extension, you can see how you can just see the beauty of it in how it works and why it works.
That used to be the strength in the Black community. But when you look at the policies that came out of Johnson administration, the Great Society policies, we're going to give a woman a check that when they have a child out of wedlock.
Yeah.
No matter how many kids she has, she can still get a check from the government.
Wow.
But she can't have a working man in the home.
Wow.
See, once upon a time,
Wow.
I remember on Sundays down south.
Yeah.
I mean, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, everybody, together after church. Or my first tour of duty was over in Vicenza, Italy, with the Airborne Battalion there. And you would go out, and what would you see at a dinner table? Just the full Italian family.
Yes.
Grandma and grandpa at the head,
Yeah.
and all the kids there and everything. And they knew the honor and the respect that had to be given. But now when you go into communities, especially inner city communities, you don't see that level of respect. The biggest beatdown I got, Jeff, from my dad was when I was down south in Cuthbert, Georgia, his hometown where he grew up. And I was out playing with some pals.
Yeah.
And when I got back to granddaddy's house, Daddy was there and laid me out. Laid me, and I'm thinking, what did I do? I just walked into the house, and he said, "You disrespected me. You better not ever do that again." You know what I did? All of those people, all of those old people that were sitting out there on the porch, I did not say hello, ma'am, hello, sir, as I walked by. And they knew who I was.
It got back.
I was Buck West's son, and they got on the phone and they called the old World War II Army corporal, and he laid me out. We have lost that. I remember the days we would sit and watch the old man play checkers.
Oh,
and just be amazed at them. And of course, every now and then we say, I could beat you.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They say, well, come on there, young buck. And 3 moves and you're done.
Oh, man.
But it's those type of things we're missing.
I grew up in a very similar kind of setting. On Sundays after church, we would drive down to my grandparents' house, where the rest of my parents had very extended families, like 6 or 7 brothers and sisters on each side, and we would go. And it would be like a Sunday afternoon thing, and the guys would sit and watch football. The kids would be outside screaming
with
and
your
yelling.
Cousins, and
And then there would be this feast being prepared in the kitchen, and then we'd all come out. We'd sit down, say grace, and eat, and then shortly thereafter we would all go. But it happened every weekend. And I didn't really. I mean, there were times when I just would stay, and because it was about an hour and a half drive to go to my grandparents, and I would want to stay and play with my friends versus go and hang out with my family. And to say that now, I'm shamed about that. I spent plenty of weekends there. I don't want people to think that I failed, but it was just because that was the life for almost from as young as I can remember till I was a young teenager. And then as a young teenager, when I had the freedom to be able to drive myself, I was able to go to church and then come back home, and then my parents would go and do things. But I can remember the lessons kind of at times. Like I remember the first lesson that I learned was my first sip of beer. An uncle had, I remember all the guys were sitting there watching the game, and my uncle asked me to go get him a beer, and I did, and he asked me to open it, and I did. He's like, "You want to take a sip?" And I'm like, looking around. I didn't see my dad.
Yeah.
I was like, sure. I took a sip, and I hated it.
Yeah.
I was like, as a kid, I was like, ugh. Ugh. He goes, take another. And I'm like, ugh, no more. And to this day, I still really don't drink beer.
And he knew what he was doing.
He knew exactly
what he was doing. Or I think about in my family, when my dad got me my first BB gun.
Oh, nice.
And, taught me how to go out there and plink squirrels and pigeons and stuff like that. And he taught me about how you have to protect your home. And he showed me the shotgun.
Yeah.
And he taught me about, you don't mess with this unless it's necessary.
Yeah.
But think about that. My dad was teaching me about the Second Amendment without telling me it was the Second Amendment.
That's so true.
And so when you have these role models, my godfather was a Tuskegee Airman.
No way.
Yeah, William Sticky Jackson. My dad was a World War II veteran. So at the age of 15, my dad challenges me to be the first officer in the family. So that's why it's so important we get these things back into the home. That's why it's so important. You look at our military right now.
Yeah.
Suffering from, recruiting and retention levels all-time low,
man.
Because we're not reinforcing that generational service once again.
Oh, yeah.
And so it has to start back in the home. I learned respect for this country. I learned respect for law enforcement and then police officers. I learned all of those important things. My interest in math was because my dad would sit down. I was an Atlanta Braves fan. We sit down and we Hank Aaron, Rico Carter and everybody. But my dad would the next day have me go through the box scores and say, okay, so Hank Aaron, had 5 at bats. He got 2 hits. what was his batting percentage for the game. And so he got me interested in those type of things.
God.
And then the next thing you know, my dad is introducing me to the business page in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Wow.
About investments. And so that's why it's so important, that balance of mothers and fathers in the home. I didn't need to have some lady teach me how to cook, how to, wash clothes, do anything. I mean, my wife will tell you, no, leave Alan alone. Okay. don't, he does not want you touching his dirty clothes or clean clothes or whatever. I mean, because I know how to do it.
Yeah.
I know how to make up a bed and all this type of stuff. Because I had that balance between a mother and father. And when you don't have that balance in the home, when you don't have that sense of the extended family, that understanding of respect that is due, then we see the problems that we have. Look at these young people going out and looting stores.
I can't believe it. I think Bobby was sharing something yesterday. It's gotten so bad. It was a FedEx truck.
Yeah.
FedEx truck in Memphis.
Yeah.
That got basically a roadblock, and they pilfered.
My dad would have beat my ass. Where you going, son? I'm going to go down and rob a FedEx truck. Not today.
There was that. I remember. I can't remember when it happened. It was when all the protesting was happening. But there was this one mother who saw her son.
Yeah, I remember.
And she went down and dragged him, kicking and screaming and God bless her for that. Yes. Amazing. That is, not only is that courage, but that's righteousness. That's the right thing to do, to what we were just talking about, reclaiming the parenting role in the families. Now, you already hit on it, which was your father introducing you to the Second Amendment without introducing you to the Second Amendment. But, and we came into contact through the Second Amendment, and that was a beautiful thing. The way that I try to help people to understand how important the Second Amendment is. We see it under attack, and when we were talking too, there was something else that kind of struck me. Is like back when I was a kid, I'm a little bit younger than you. The Second Amendment was shared with me through first responders, firemen, and police officers that were part of my father's network. Like he had a Friday night poker game, and he later became the chief. Then there was another fire sergeant who was there, and I learned about the Second Amendment through them, and through, they would come in their uniforms right from work sometimes. And it was really, those were the good old days. And so I can remember just kind of thinking about that and learning and them kind of just, I didn't understand it at the time, but when you mentioned, tell me about the Second Amendment without telling me about the Second Amendment, it makes sense to me now. It's like, okay, now I get it. And the importance behind it. A lot of times people will put these false idols up for what the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment exists to ensure our First Amendment is safeguarded. So that
every right.
That's true. Every right. And when we see the attack on the Second Amendment, you naturally should be assuming that they're going to be attacking all the other rights.
Of course.
But yet they're subtle about how they do that. We're starting to see more First Amendment attacks. That's become more popular. I mean, you see the cancel culture. You see all of the stuff happening in social media. So with the Second Amendment being as, I guess, so I don't want to say the word vulnerable, but if you look at it,
susceptible to attack.
Yes, that's a perfect way to put it. What are we not doing to ensure that the Second Amendment exists for future generations?
We have to really go back and get people to understand why the Founding Fathers put it there. And so on April the 19th of 1775, when the British land and they're marching inland toward Concord, Massachusetts, their intent was to destroy a weapons and armaments factory that was supplying the Sons of Liberty. And therefore, the Founding Fathers understood, if you are armed, you can be a citizen. If you are disarmed, you will be a subject.
Oh, I love that.
Now, on that day, there was no Army.
Yeah.
There was no Navy.
Nope.
There was no Marine Corps.
Yeah.
There was everyday men.
Yeah.
The militia.
Yeah.
Who came out and they met the most powerful fighting force that the world knew at that time. Yeah. And so when
gives me goosebumps thinking about it.
But that's how we got started.
Yeah.
And they fired the shot that was heard around the world. So therefore, when you read the language of the Second Amendment, it says a well-regulated militia. So first of all, go back and study. Well-regulated does not mean the ATF.
Thank you.
Well-regulated means trained.
Yeah.
What you have been going out doing, training people. The militia is ussin', all y'all. Okay, that's how we say it down south.
I love it.
But that's what it is, because the Founding Fathers said, we didn't have a standing military.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's the duty and responsibility to every person to be part of the well-regulated militia that is necessary for the security of a free state. Okay, so that's your task, American citizen.
Yeah.
That you must be well-trained and part of this force that will secure the security of a free state. What did Yamamoto said? That, we don't want to attack the United States of America. Behind every blade of grass, there's a gun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And therefore, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Yes.
That's simple language.
It really is. But I like how you put duty, as, citizenry in our country has also eroded.
Yeah.
And that's a sad state of
We don't
affairs.
teach civics.
No, that's exactly where, it's like how many graduating high school students could actually pass a citizen's test?
How many graduating college students could pass this? How many adults out there?
I have actually, and it's funny because I have looked at that test. And first of all, I think it's a sample test, but I've looked at it and I'm thinking, this should be part of this. Why are we not teaching this in our schools anymore? I don't understand why this is so.
Because if you don't teach it, then people don't know their duty in being a citizen.
Yes.
And
that's exactly
always
it.
Remember that history has taught us the first thing that dictators take away is the ability of free people to be able to defend themselves.
Yeah, to resist. So simple. It's so simple. And people always talk about, are you worried about a dictator, tyrants and I'm like, no, I'm actually not worried because we have the Second Amendment. But when you start to take the Second Amendment down or start to neuter it, now I start to get worried.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and I've had the privilege of being on several podcasts and conversations with the hosts, and some of them are not necessarily from inside the 2A space. And so I consider it a duty to help inform and educate. I don't preach. I don't try to talk down to people. I try to share with them. I try to give them a perspective. And had an interesting conversation recently where the guest asked, well, if somebody was holding a gun to your head and you had to pass some sort of legislation about gun control, what would you pass? And he had a couple of samples, and I'm like, well, none of those. I would not do any of those. If you want to have that conversation, why aren't we not talking about legislation that actually would provide a firearm to people?
Mm-hmm.
That would provide a firearm with a condition that they would have to be trained with the firearm. If you want gun control, okay, but I'm
this
not.
Is my gun control.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great one. But I'm not about gun control, but I'm about helping the people. And if helping the people means some folks, socioeconomically can't afford a firearm to protect themselves, single moms, minorities, whatever the case might be, then why isn't the government stepping up to help them by assisting them learn how to protect themselves and give them the tools and the training to help them protect them? So that was my argument. Not my argument, but my counter argument to their position, their proposition.
Well, let's just look at some cases.
Yeah.
Let's look at what just happened in Maine.
Right.
Okay. Here's an individual that we knew he had mental issues.
Correct.
He had threatened to go and shoot up a National Guard armory. He had recently been in a mental facility over the summer. And to me, that's clear red flags. Why wasn't something done?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the other thing, you talk about gun control. So you put a placard up on a business that says that you can't, law-abiding citizen, coming here with your weapon that you constitutionally can carry.
Yeah.
And therefore, that business has told you to surrender your right to defend yourself. Well, that business now has the responsibility to protect and defend you. And they did not do that. So this person who does not care about the law, and then we know already has a mental condition, he comes in and shoots helpless people. No one was there to be able to provide protection.
Yeah.
Let's look at what happened at Sutherland Springs.
Yeah.
At the church shooting down there. This person, 4473 form, asked you about domestic violence.
Yeah.
That guy had, charges on domestic violence while he was in the Air Force. Dishonorable discharge, another question that's asked on 4473.
Yeah.
And guess what happens? The Air Force never uploaded him into the NICS system.
Yeah.
So he goes out, lies on the form, gets an AR. But thank God you had Stephen Williford, a trained NRA firearms instructor that neutralized that target. So, who are we going to put the gun control on? Or let's look at what happened in Uvalde.
Yeah.
In Uvalde, the young man that shot up that school lived in a house with his grandparents.
Yeah.
His grandfather was a felon. The law says that felons cannot own weapons and they cannot be in a domicile with weapons.
Yep.
So how is it that this young man put down his grandparents' address, which is the address of a felon, and then something didn't pop up and say, you cannot get this firearm? So don't talk to me about punishing legal law-abiding citizens. Talk to me about fixing this system that is broken. Nicholas Cruz down in Parkland, Florida, 20 to 22 call-outs to his home. Expelled from that high school, put into another high school, but not reported because, Barack Obama is racist to report violent, kids of minority nature. And then he comes back and shoots up his own school.
There's a lot of things to unpack there that I hope that people can really see. So I want to kind of tackle them just for those that might not really have understood all those comments. What we are talking about is there is existing laws on the books.
Yeah.
We don't need to add any new ones.
Nope.
We need to enforce the ones that are there.
Yep.
On top of that, we need to, I love how you put it, that facility, organization, business stripped you of your rights. Therefore, they are duty bound to substitute for your rights by offering you the similar level of protection.
Yep.
And when I say similar, it's like I don't want a rent-a-cop there. I want somebody that's trained. I want somebody that is equally on, maybe not equally on par with you and I, but equally on par with the average citizen that it can protect themselves. And they didn't do that, and they won't do that. And that's the type of conversations that I think we should have. All right, if you want to put up a no gun sign, that's your right. Go for it.
That's your private business and establishment. Correct. But now, what are you
quid
doing?
Pro quo.
That's right.
How are you going to? And that's the conversations that don't seem to happen. Hey, I'm all for supporting businesses. I'm all for that. But we can't just, for the sake of businesses, strip citizens of their rights.
What would we say if a business put up a sign that said, you have no free speech here?
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of your Bill of Rights.
Yeah. Yeah. That just baffles my mind that it's okay to strip you of your Second Amendment, but all the other ones are okay. You can keep all those other ones, but not the second one, because the second one, you become not just I've always looked at it this way. A free man is somebody that can act in accordance with what nature has endowed him with.
The laws of nature and
Exactly.
nature's God. That's natural rights theory. John Locke, Thomas Jefferson wrote into the Declaration.
Exactly. And so whenever you start to strip me of that, that's where I think the problems exist. So when we talk about, if you as a business owner want to go down that road, that's great. But then you have a responsibility that we're not talking about.
Yeah.
That's the problem. If you want to do that, I'm good. I'm game. But let's also bring in the conversation. Okay, so how and if you don't, what are you liable for?
It was interesting. I do some speaking for Young America's Foundation. I get to go on college campuses, and they had me go to the University of Michigan, not exactly a conservative university, but the University of Michigan, to talk about Second Amendment and gun control and all these things. And of course, you always got the students that are going to be against you. And there was this one young lady that was there, and she asked me a question. I said, you know something? I just drove onto your campus. Your campus is not closed. So anyone can come onto your campus. Now, the University of Michigan says that you have no Second Amendment rights on our campus. That's an open campus. The University of Michigan police, when I visited them, did not carry weapons. Yeah. I said, so who protects you on the University of Michigan campus? I mean, from what I read, the University of Michigan police are supposed to call the actual Ann Arbor police, which I think their response rate may be 3 to 5 minutes. That's not helping you, young lady, when you are being accosted and attacked while you're walking back from, whatever studying to your dorm at, whatever hours.
Yeah.
And you have the right to be able to walk back to your dorm at whatever hours.
Fearless, without fear.
Without fear. Yeah. But yet now you have an institution that has stripped you of your right to protect yourself, and they're not providing you any protection. And she got it.
Did she?
She got it. I mean, she said, she
good.
said, I didn't know that. And I said, well, that's why they bring me here to these campuses to talk to you, you know.
That's a great story. Yeah, that's not where I thought.
But think about how many universities, and that's why when my daughter was doing her master's degree at SMU, an open campus, anyone can come on there.
Yeah.
Dad got her a 9mm pistol, okay, because she was biochemistry or whatever, and she was there late at night doing experiments. I said, no one is going to turn you into a victim.
Yeah. And first, that's a great story about how that young lady was able to kind of maybe not change her mind, but actually be open to
make her think.
Exactly.
That's all I want to do.
Man, I'll tell you, that's the thing. When I have these conversations, I hear the regurgitated talking points.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you really think, though? Not what you read, not what you have maybe, been exposed to, but what do you really think? I mean, how do you think this all works? Do you understand how violent crime works? Do you have any appreciation for that? Have you ever witnessed violent crime? Do you know somebody who's been the victim of a violent crime? Where are you basing this from? Because if you're just, if you're on the bandwagon,
it's feelings.
Yes.
Just feelings.
And so let's separate feelings. I'm willing to talk about feelings. I have two, frick and frack, and they're always fighting each other. So I'm willing to go down that road and talk about feelings. But feelings should not govern us.
No.
Feelings are an incredible part of our lives, but they should not govern us, because when they do, we typically make bad choices.
Yeah.
So when we talk about gun-free zones and how gun-free zones are, in my opinion, the worst thing that could exist for our freedoms, and maybe freedoms, we'll put that on the table, but for our safety.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, when you are sitting there and you're talking to somebody who is trying to toe that party line that gun-free zones are important, we need to have gun-free zones. People shouldn't be allowed to bring guns on there into those areas. And I respond with, who checks the criminals, the felons that are going to bring the guns onto it? How do you reconcile with that? So you've managed to strip the law-abiding citizen of their right to defend themselves and protect themselves. How are you going to institute any checks and balances to ensure that the criminals don't bring guns when they wish to commit? Yeah,
they don't.
But that part of that conversation, that logical circle to try to get to that conclusion is completely void.
Well, let's take the original intent and writing of the Second Amendment and apply it to today. So here we live in America where our border is wide open. 1 to 1.5 million people, we don't know who they are, where they're here in the country. Many of them single military age males. That 1 to 1.5 million number is greater than the combined active duty strength of the United States Army and United States Marine Corps. So basically, you have an incredibly large fighting force that's here somewhere in your country. At the same time, you have activist judges and district attorneys that are releasing violent criminals back onto the streets.
Yes.
At the same time, you live down in Austin. Austin defunded their police by $150 million. Now, Austin is the 13th highest city in the country for homicides. And we, on top of all these things, want to disarm Americans.
Yeah.
Which is why the founding fathers said the well-regulated militia, us, you, being necessary for the security of a free state. If the government is failing on their duties, and I would have your podcast watchers read Frederick Bastiat, The Law.
Okay.
Why does government exist? Government exists to protect your life, your liberty, your property. Because what we have decided is that we can get out there and you can protect your little fiefdom, I can protect my little fiefdom, but the next thing you know, you have anarchy, you have chaos.
Yeah.
And so what individuals do is they say to this collective organization, you have the responsibility to collectively protect us all, protect our life, our liberty, and our property. But if you're not doing that, understand, we retain the right to be able to do that ourselves. And so you have a government now in the United States of America that's purposely saying, we are not going to protect your life, your liberty, and your property. And
we're going to take your means away.
And we're going to take the means by which you can protect your life and liberty. How the hell does that work out? Okay. That's the simple way to look at this.
I agree. And I will take it one step further. No matter how illogical it looks, when you just take it, when you just when you eliminate all those other variables, whatever you're left with, however illogical it may seem, is the actual truth. So I see this dismantling of our rights and freedoms so that a new form of government can be instituted, one where we don't have those freedoms anymore, as a constitutional republic.
That's called totalitarianism.
Yes, exactly. And so when we went back and we talked earlier about, tyranny and why we have these rights in the very beginning, now all of a sudden we're in a part of our history where tyranny potentially is right there on the doorstep.
Isn't it amazing that circular, cycle? Yes. When we stood up against tyranny and now we're coming right. But that's why I call the progressive socialist left the new redcoats.
Yeah. It's subtle. It's very clear. It's very kind of like, it's just it's words, just titles, but you remove those titles and you look at actions. Yes. It's very clearly defined, very clearly defined.
Yep.
Hey friend, it's dark half the time on this planet. Unless you got magic powers or a mountain of carrots, you're going to need TNVC to see at nighttime the right way.
Oh, I love it. I could talk about this forever, but let's get into some other stuff. We talked a little bit about this already, but I like to kind of, usually I start with having the guests kind of give us a little rundown on, where they were born, where they grew up, and in this case, what in their childhood impacted them to venture on the journey of life that in your case, I have an idea, but what in your childhood moved you closer to the military career?
Well, I was born in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia in 1961 in a blacks-only hospital. That tells you how great this country is, that a kid born in a blacks-only hospital can grow up and have the life that I've been able to have. My dad was a World War II veteran, as I articulated. My mother did 25, almost 26 years civilian service with the 6th Marine Corps District Headquarters in Atlanta. Wow. So the military was always surrounding me. My older brother was a Vietnam infantryman in the United States Marine Corps. He was wounded at Khe Sanh.
Oh, wow.
And so, like I said, at the age of 15, my dad challenged me to be the first officer in the family because he was a corporal. My older brother was a lance corporal. So I joined high school junior ROTC, Henry Grady High School in Atlanta, Georgia in 1976.
Wow.
And I still remember my instructors from high school.
Really?
Lieutenant Colonel Pagonis, Major Heredia, Master Sergeant Buchanan, and Sergeant First Class McMichael.
Wow.
Because of the impact
I was just going to say.
Absolutely. And
wow.
so I went
100%.
on to the University of Tennessee and through ROTC there. And on 31 July 1982, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the field artillery. And it was the only time I ever saw my dad with tears in his eyes.
Wow.
When he was at my right shoulder, Mom was at the left shoulder, and they pinned on those gold lieutenant bars. And sadly, that was the only promotion my dad ever saw because he ended up passing away due to a massive stroke while I was stationed overseas in Italy. So, but to know that I achieved his goal and objective for me, and again, coming back to what we talked about, when you don't have parents that are setting high standards for you, setting the bar high for you, saying this is what I want you to do and achieve, and this is why. When you don't have, that type of parents that are in your life that are saying, you don't grow up to be a victim.
Yeah.
You grow up every day seeking how you can be a victor. And my greatest lesson that my dad taught me, and it's on a wood carving in my home, is that you find out what the standard is and then you exceed it.
Yes.
And that's what I've tried to do my entire life. Just tell me what the standard is. Don't tell me that I can't achieve it. You just tell me what the damn standard is.
I love that.
And I'll blow through it.
I love that. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but I can recall as a young, as a young frogman, I was interested in like who is the best?
Yeah.
And who is the best? Okay. This is the best. I want to be better than the best.
Yeah.
And I don't, that probably might have had some unintended consequences of perfectionism and a little bit of, OCD sprinkled in with all of that. But it did serve its purpose, and it gave me great insight, and it gave me the ability to achieve things that honestly, I don't think thinking back when I was that age, would I have accomplished everything that I've accomplished?
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't. I wouldn't have thought that I could have done that. But I put myself in those situations where I do a similar kind of rundown where, okay, this is the best. This is what's out there. What can I do to do that better?
Yeah.
How can I make this better?
Yeah.
And for better or for worse, that's kind of how I've always looked at things. And I try to, sometimes I give myself a little, a joke a little bit about like the Midas touch, like whatever I touch, I want to make better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's,
that starts in the home.
yeah. Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. It should absolutely start. And that's something that as a father, I probably did not instill in my kids. I think, as a young father, you always are also questioning what's right and what's wrong. And I think I probably questioned myself way too many times instead of trusting my gut and going with instinct. And I had a wonderful family. I mean, I had a great childhood. I have no complaints whatsoever. Instead of relying on those lessons from my younger childhood to help teach me, I just really, I wanted to do it on my own. And that was the other thing too. I opted to try and figure things out by myself rather than go to the sources, go to my parents, go to my grandparents and try to get advice. Now I do. I go to my dad a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
I go to my dad. I was like, and he jokes with me all the time. In fact, I'm going to see him in a couple weeks, but he jokes with me all the time. He's like, yeah, you were pretty much stubborn and hard-headed. I just let you figure things out. And when you decided to come back to me, then I was always there. I'm like, yep, that's what I try to do with my kids now. So if you had to pick one thing that you do for yourself every day to try to be a better American, be a better citizen, be a better husband, better grandfather, what would that be?
It's my Bible devotional because that's where it starts.
Nice.
And I will tell people that my faith has enabled me to be the man that I am. Not that I'm sinless and I'm perfect. I've got flaws, I got shortcomings, I got faults. But I know from whom I get the strength. And I know that each and every day, I still get up 6 days out of the week and I knock out PT this morning. This morning I did 4.5 miles and some push-ups and crunches and everything. But before I go out of the house, I'm reading my Bible devotional. And it just means everything to me because it gives me that right perspective. Yeah. And it gives me a calm and a peace.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that we have to get back to. I'm not pushing people to say that, I'm going to beat you in the head. You got to be a Christian guy.
Right.
But I think that you need to understand that there's something that you have to believe in that's greater than yourself.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
And man will always let you down. Okay. So don't put your faith in man. And
we're flawed big time.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that the world tries to tell you that there's all these things. I mean, sex, drugs, all these type of things, alcohol, that you can try to fill that God-shaped hole that you have in your heart. And sadly, it's hurting a lot of our veterans. I think that's where we have these high rates of suicide. So, Mighty Oaks Foundation, I don't know if you heard of them, Chad Robichaux. Yeah. I mean, he does a great job in bringing that faith component back to help our veterans that are struggling with, PTSD, suicide natures and things of that. So that's what makes a difference for me every day of my life is that, moments with God to just devote myself to, a piece of scripture, and it just sets my mind at peace.
Man, first of all, I think that's wonderful. There are a lot of people that are struggling. There are a lot of people that are trying to find their way. And it seems probably very obvious, the question, but how would somebody start that? If that could bring them peace, how would you suggest they start that?
Well, I think you got to surrender. I think you have to hit that point where you say, I can't do it myself. And you've got to open up your heart and be receptive to it. And then, like I say, go and find someone that, you got to have a battle buddy.
Yeah.
In Proverbs, it says iron sharpens iron. Yeah. And too often we get out there and we think we can do these things all by ourselves. And so, accountability partners, prayer partners, whatever you want to call it. I just call it a battle buddy.
I love that.
And none of us get in the foxhole by ourselves. Yeah. Nobody goes into clearing a building by themselves. Yeah. You got someone that's got your six. Yeah. And I think as long as you always have a trusted person that you can go to and that has your six and will tell you when you're screwed up. Yeah. And will pat you on the back when you're doing good. Yeah. And pick you up when you feel a little down. I think that's where it starts.
That's a great point. I mean, it's something that we take for granted because that's kind of our culture in the military. We have all that we have that support system network that's kind of built into us. And then when you leave the military, you kind of don't have that anymore. And
that's the problem.
Yeah.
A lot of these young veterans, they are isolating themselves. And, you look at the VFWs, the American Legion posts and all that. I mean, they're dying.
Yeah, they are.
Because no one is going out there. And so, somehow we got to connect that old generation to the new generations and again, the teaching, coaching, and mentoring.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
I can, so I found for me, the struggle that I went through leaving the service was trying to find my new purpose.
Yes.
I as soon as I left, there was just this emptiness.
Because every single day for you as a SEAL is task and purpose, task and purpose.
Yeah.
And you knew it and you understood
100%.
it. The best part of that movie, the Hurt Locker?
Yeah.
Was at the end.
Yeah.
When he's standing there and the wife tells him to go down and get a box of cereal. And he's looking in the aisle and he's got all of these boxes of cereal. And he's like, this is a tough decision. and then the next thing you know, what does it cut to? Him going back to another deployment. Yeah. Because in the combat zone, he knew what his task and purpose was. Go out there and find bombs and defuse them.
So true.
And so that's why I think it's so important that we have that bridge to get people to understand what their next task and purpose is. And I will tell you that at this time in our country's life cycle, Jeff, we need men and women who have said that they will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We need them to get out there, run for city council, run for school board, run for county commission, run for sheriff. I mean, all of these different positions bring some honor and integrity and commitment back to this country. Go out and talk to young people at schools and teach them what it means to be a veteran. You know what pissed me off this past Veterans Day? Sons of bitches out there, pro-Hamas demonstrators in New York City.
Tearing down the flag?
Tearing down the flag on
We
veterans.
talked about this.
I mean, you want to talk about, choke yourself with my hand, okay? We need to have veterans say, this is not right.
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough, and this is the reason why it's not right.
Yeah.
And if you had a veteran that was the mayor of New York City, he'd shut that crap down.
Well, I mean, the problem is like, I look at the pro-Hamas demonstrators as, children that are disrespectful, not listening to their parents. Our government is the parents, not acting the role of the parent in the household, not cleaning up the house.
We placated that bad behavior.
Big time.
And it's Pavlovian. If you reward bad behavior, you get more bad behavior.
That's exactly what's happening right now. I'm very upset about that. I feel like, and I think here's the other problem. You shouldn't, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. You shouldn't be surprised when you elect leaders that have no leadership qualities. One of the things that I look at and I'm very revered about is leadership. And that what I mean by that is when you are entrusted with leadership, it's not an easy burden to bear.
No, it's not.
And
it shouldn't be.
Exactly. And that's the problem that I think a lot of people look at these leadership positions, these political positions, and they look at them from a prestigious point of what it can do for them.
Yeah.
Not what it was meant to, which is what you can do for the people.
Selfless service.
Exactly.
And having been in, that arena, there's a difference. Politicians are going to tell you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah.
In order for them to continue to get elected and stay at that position.
Yeah.
A leader is going to tell you what you need to hear. And he does not care about the ramifications of the consequences thereof.
Yes.
Because a leader knows he has to be able to look, or she has to be able to look at themselves in the mirror at the end of the day and say, I did what was right.
And I tell you, that's the problem that I feel. And you're seeing a trend. We've seen like this, maybe not this last election cycle, but the one before. We saw several military veterans get elected into various
positions. A lot of Navy SEALs, man. What's up with that? You guys.
It's a little, it's starting to, there's more rumors milling about that there's going to be some additional guys. And I encourage, because I believe in what we're talking about, what makes that work is the selfless service attitude.
Absolutely.
And I believe that maybe I don't see a lot of statesmen.
No.
I see a lot of politicians. And, a statesman to me is that's the type of individuals that we need in our public offices.
Yeah.
We need statesmen. We need those that have that selfless service, that understand hey, this is not the easy choice. This is the right choice.
It's the right choice.
And it's not the popular choice. It's the right choice.
It's not the poll tested choice.
Yes,
Okay?
exactly.
That's the thing that kills people. See, and when you have taken an oath to the Constitution and you've been willing to make the last full measure of devotion for it, it means something to you.
Yeah.
And you just don't sit back and say, so what did the Constitution says we're supposed to protect the nation from invasion? Who cares? Let's open up the border. Let's let everybody come in. No. I mean, if you understand what that means, and as I told people when I was up there, because I was on the Armed Services Committee in the House of Representatives, I said, I've been on the receiving end of an AK-47, a PKM, RPG, and all this type of stuff. I know what happens at the tactical level.
Yeah.
So now that helps me to understand the decisions that need to be made at this strategic policy level.
Exactly.
And if you don't have that connection, then you just go up there and say, well, let's have a little DEI in the military.
Yeah.
Let's not worry about, standards. Let's nominate a guy to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He believes that only 46% of pilots in the Air Force should be white. I mean, it ain't about quality.
Yeah.
It's not about content or character.
Yeah.
Let's let all the gender dysphoric weirdos in, and let's, give them taxpayer funded hormonal therapies and surgeries.
God.
While we don't have enough, ammunition to go out and train.
The list goes on and on.
It goes on and on.
And people think that we're making this up, but we're not.
That's the sad thing.
That's the hard part for people to understand. Those that are not really in tune with what's happening within our military, that's the sad state of affairs. The greatest fighting force that our nation's ever produced, that the world has ever seen.
Yep.
And it's been
decimated.
Oh God, it's sad. It's so sad.
Or think about, we got veterans that are homeless and jobless.
Yeah.
But you can come into this country legally, get a free cell phone, get free taxpayer money, get medical, put on a plane, and medical, everything.
Yep.
But yet we turn to our veterans and say, Foxtrot Oscar.
Yeah. 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 And for those that don't know what those initials mean, that means fuck off. And I'm not afraid to say that because that's completely unacceptable, especially in this day and age. Here's another follow-up question to all the dialogue. We talk about a transition. We talk about the difficulty of finding that next ridgeline. What's my next ridgeline? How am I going to tackle this next task and purpose? Or how am I going to find my next task and purpose? So many try to fit into what exists in the world for them. But I can't help but wonder if there was of course this would have to be trial and error, but a more direct pipeline into the political infrastructure from the military, almost like a lateral. You move from your military career to a political career where you can work as not necessarily an intern, but you can work as an associate inside of certain political offices to try to help build maybe an understanding, an idea about what happens in the politics.
Well, you do have that. You do have these programs where, officers and some in senior enlisted, they can go and work in senators' offices and members of Congress office. But the thing is that when they get out, what is that pipeline? And that pipeline should be when they go back to whatever community, how did they get into local governance? How did they get into state level governance? Because that's important too. I mean, we need to reestablish that whole thing about 100%. Federalism in the 10th Amendment, so, because it is free and independent states that created, the federal government. So we need to have that sincere, teaching, coaching, mentoring thing. And that's why one of the things that I did when I was in Congress, I started a political action committee called the Guardian Fund. And the Guardian Fund specifically looks at supporting military and minority conservatives to get to run for Congress or to run for Senate.
Nice.
And it has done just it's a decade old now,
Really?
and the success has been absolutely
Is that just
incredible.
for Florida only?
No, that's for the country.
Oh, wow.
So I started that back when I was a member of Congress because the thing was, I after retiring and I taught high school for a year in Deerfield Beach in Florida, and that was such an enjoyable experience. I volunteered to go back to Afghanistan. Okay, because I got tired of breaking up fights every day. If I'm going to be in a fight, I might as well be armed.
Might as well be able to fight back.
Absolutely. So I went to Afghanistan for 2.5 years, and while over there, people were, sending me messages, from South Florida saying, would you ever think about running for Congress? And I never thought about that. I mean, that was the farthest thing from my mind. But, I came back and talked to people, and then I went to Washington, D.C., and said, hey, I'd like to look at maybe running for Congress in this district down in South Florida. And the first thing they asked me was, how much money are you going to fund into your campaign? And I was like, hey, McFly, I just got back from Afghanistan. I spent 22 years in the United States military. I'm not some rich guy. That's the first thing we got to do. And so what I wanted to make sure is that no one up there in Washington, D.C. could ever look at a veteran in the face and say, we're not going to support you because you don't have enough money.
God, that's sad. That's sad that instead
but that's the nature of the business.
Yeah, I get it. I know. I don't want to sound naive to say that the playing field should be equal, but we know that it's not.
No, it's not. And so that's why I'm so glad to see, that we've helped so many of your brother SEALs and, many, soldiers and, even, look at Lieutenant General, doggone, I just forgot his name, Marine Combat Fighter Pilot, and he's out of Michigan. He is the chairman. He's the chairman of the Guardian Fund right now.
Nice.
And who would ever, we have a 3-star Marine general now, a member of Congress.
Nice.
And so that's what we want to do.
Nice.
Because that's leadership.
Yeah, it is. And I think sometimes people are also unaware of what leadership really looks like. They might have this idea in their head, but until you actually see leadership, like I can recall in my time in the teams, there would be times when I would be like, I don't know if I really want to go downrange with that guy, but I'll go downrange with this guy in a heartbeat. And I hate to say it like that, but that's true. And
that's the truth.
I joke about it. I say, like Walmart and NASA hire from the same gene pool. So, it's okay. But in this case, to have that type of example to
Bergman, Lieutenant General Bergman.
Oh, nice save. Nice save, man. But to have that kind of example, I'm not saying that you have to be a carbon copy, but to see what leadership really looks like, and especially see how it works. Watch it, how it works. I had a great, and I do this occasionally. A friend of mine has a very successful business, and his his chief operating officer, I asked, hey, do you mind if I follow you around for a day? Mind if I just kind of observe you, kind of your meetings, your conversations with everybody? You mind if I do that? And he's like, why? Yeah, you want to follow me? I'm like, yeah, look at this place. This is a successful organization. And I'm curious to see how, and I know that it's successful because of all the moving parts, but you kind of
orchestrate it.
Exactly. So I'm curious. And it's great. It's, to see how leaders take on their challenges, to see how they overcome those everyday obstacles that everybody has to have, and how they manage that, and how they exploit the most powerful resource they have, which is their people. How they do that, how they encourage and incentivize them to do the right thing at all times. And that's what I meant by when you have a leader like 3-star in place like that, observe, watch, see how they do, see how other people gravitate towards that type of leadership too. And you should be saying, how come I got nobody gravitating towards me?
Yeah.
Well, probably because you're not the example.
You suck. Okay,
I didn't want to say it like that, but
you suck.
You did. All right, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What's been the biggest challenge in your life?
Wow.
That came out of left field.
Yeah, it did.
Set you up.
The biggest challenge that I've seen is to get people to understand the nature of this country, its history, its values, its principles, because the lies are so blatant. And
you would think.
And, how can you follow false narratives?
Yeah.
How can you follow false, prophets? That's what I kind of call them.
Yeah, 100%.
And these people that masquerade themselves as quote unquote being a leader, but they're just, like I say, a politician that, is fed words to say.
Yeah.
They wouldn't make a good private.
Yeah.
in the military. So I think that's the biggest challenge is how do we get this country to understand that we are our own worst enemy right now?
That's Abe Lincoln said it the best.
Yeah.
America will destroy herself from inside.
House divided cannot stand.
And it's coming to fruition. We're literally seeing that. And I'm very critical of the actors that would drive division. in our country.
Well, it starts with the media.
Yeah, 100% there. And then, it continues with legislations, acts, all of these things. Anything that is divisive in nature immediately is something that I'm guarded about.
Yeah.
Because why? Why are you trying to divide us? Why are you trying to create a them versus us condition?
Well, think about that. I mean, this cultural Marxism that we have in this country that would say Jeff is an oppressor.
Yeah.
Alan is oppressed.
Yeah.
Just because of the melanin content. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
And now, like I said, you're trying to put that into the military. How can you have an effective fighting force?
You can't.
If you're saying one group are just bad.
Yeah.
Irredeemably bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the other group, well, you just irredeemably are victims.
Yep.
And everybody's against you. Everything is racist, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, what's the nature of that?
Yeah.
And it was so funny. I had the opportunity to go to University of Buffalo to speak about America is not a racist nation.
Okay.
And I just used my own life as an example.
Okay.
Born in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, same neighborhood Dr. Martin Luther King was born in a blacks-only hospital. At the age of 50, I'm representing a congressional district that when I was born, blacks could not go anywhere near that congressional district, which was Fort Lauderdale Beach up to Palm Beach Island.
Nice.
My dad's a corporal. I become a lieutenant colonel. The Republican Party of Texas, the largest state Republican party in the country. I'm the chairman of it. So what has held me back?
Yeah.
But you know who got upset?
Huh.
The black students. You can go back and you can see it. It was a national story. I had to be escorted off the campus by white police officers because the black students, they just went ballistic over that.
I don't understand. Why?
Because they have been beaten in the head that they're victims and that they're oppressed and everyone's against them. When I hear people say, well, if you can't do math, it's because math is racist. That's bullshit. If you can't understand 2 + 2 = 4, you need to study.
That's because you're dumb.
Yeah, it's because you're dumb. And you look in Baltimore County where you got less than 5% of the students there can do math and read at grade level. Yeah, absolutely. It's scary. And so this is manipulative, what people are doing. This means of dividing, and that's what Karl Marx was all about.
100%. And I'll tell you, the other thing about division is that it's effective. It works.
Totally effective if you have the weak mind.
If the constant message if that message is so loud and so omnipresent in every part of your life. Constantly. Exactly. You just and what happens is I feel people they don't necessarily believe the message, but they go along with the message. As opposed to actually saying, no, don't bring that to my doorstep. No, thank you.
And see, that's the challenge.
Yes. I love that. That's a beautiful thing too.
How do we break through that when people are constantly being bombarded? I mean, I think it's starting to change.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at inner city communities. I mean, look in Chicago now where they're saying, we don't want these illegals here.
Yeah. Martha's Vineyard. Get them out.
Yeah. And or when you look at, why aren't you talking about the black on black crime? Why all of these things? Why are our kids not getting educated? It's starting to change, but we have to have the same fervor as the voices of division have.
I agree. And we don't.
No, we don't.
And I think there's a couple, I theorize that there's a couple of reasons. Fear is one of them. I think fear is a big one. Fear of being put into that spotlight and being targeted.
Yep.
And I say that
you don't call me a name.
Yeah. But I'm also like if you stand up or rise up against the new age thinking, then you become the target. You now are the focus of all of those groups, and that becomes intimidating. That becomes offsetting to your way of life. That becomes disruptive to your work, and all of a sudden now your work is questioning whether or not you should be a good employee because you're bringing.
But more of us need to stand up, and they can't target everybody.
That's the thing. There is strength in numbers.
That's right.
And so if one starts to do it, and then another, and then another, and then another, before you know it, those voices will be the louder voice, because we are the silent majority.
We are.
And rightfully so, because we just go about our business. We just want to live our lives, be good people, raise family. Yes, exactly. That's what we want. but don't come messing with that. When you do, now things get a little.
56 men signed their death warrant called the Declaration of Independence. And look at where we are.
It's a beautiful, and I challenge people to actually read the Declaration of Independence.
I do too, all the time.
I'm surprised at how many people haven't actually read it. Yeah. And it's, I mean, hey, okay, so maybe you got other things on your mind, but if you're going to sit
there, it takes 7 minutes at the most.
And then how is it that you see fit to lecture me on it?
Yeah.
If you haven't read it, how can you actually lecture? I mean, you can lecture me on it, but you're not really, I don't take you seriously.
No,
not at all. All right, let me ask you this next question. How do you deal with failure?
Ooh. Well, my mother taught me the measure of a man is not how many times it gets knocked down, it's how many times it gets back up.
Love it.
So that's how you deal with failure.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have failure.
Yeah.
But you don't let that define you.
Yeah.
And I think that what has happened in our country is that we are trying to excuse failure, and, people are now pushing their failures off on other folks instead of taking the responsibilities
100%.
themselves
100%.
and seeing how can I get better. Look, it's just the same as when we go out and we do a combat op.
Yep.
Sometimes you win.
Sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
But guess what? The next day, you got to go right back out there.
Yeah.
And that's why we always have AARs, after action reviews. Okay, what went well? What did not go well? How can we improve? How can we get better? Because we got to get back out there and do it all over again. That's life.
Yeah.
Okay, you screw up on Monday. That doesn't mean, okay, I just stay in the house.
Not going to go to work.
And let Tuesday go by and maybe things will be better on Wednesday. No. You got to look down at the end of the day and say, okay, how can I get better and have a better Tuesday? And you got to get up and you got to get back out there. You got to stay in the fight.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So you deal with failure by saying, okay, it comes, but I'm not going to let it define me. I'm going to continue to push on through it.
I love hearing that. I wish more people could appreciate the value that failure brings.
Look at Abraham Lincoln. How many times did he lose elections?
Yeah.
But here he became president at a crucial moment in the life cycle of this country.
So true. The one thing I will say is that the negative stigma of failure can sometimes be like, I felt at times that I didn't want to fail and I would hold back. I would kind of like do just enough to not push myself to that point where I would fail.
Yeah.
But I stunted my growth.
You do.
I prevented myself from really reaching new plateaus. Mm-hmm. And so that's the other thing that I tell people is that don't be afraid to fail.
No, it's, one of my favorite scriptures out of the Bible is Romans chapter 5, verses 3-5. And it says, trials and tribulations produces perseverance.
Yes.
Perseverance produces proven character. And proven character produces hope. Not hope in man, but hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. And that's, again, why I say you got to believe in something greater than yourself that will, pick you up and say, get back out there and get at it. So often we don't want to have the hard times. So often we don't realize that a diamond is just a black rock. It really is until you put it through pressure.
Yep.
And that steel is purified through intense heat.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you got to go through the trials and tribulations, and don't look at it and say that, oh, wow, everybody hates me.
Yeah.
Look at it as an opportunity. How do I grow from this?
Yeah.
That's what you have
That's
to
the
do.
key thing.
And you can't be risk averse. I think that another thing that has hurt our country and has hurt our military recently is that we're just risk averse.
And I feel like I was that way. I feel like I can speak clearly now. I didn't like it. I didn't like to admit it, but I feel like there were things that I didn't do because I didn't want to risk failure. Mm-hmm. And I can look back and see that in and of itself was a failure. That was a poor choice.
Identify risk, and you'd see, okay, what things can I do to mitigate the risk?
And that's it. And then you gotta, after that, you just gotta let it. You gotta go. Just let it go. All right. Let me ask you this last question. What do you want as the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
The biggest takeaway is that when you go back to Constitution Day, September the 17th of 1787, Benjamin Franklin comes out of Constitutional Hall in Philadelphia. He's met by a female, a socialite by the name of Mrs. Powell. Mrs. Powell asks Benjamin Franklin a question that pertains to today. She said, well, doctor, what is it that we have, a monarchy or a republic? Franklin replied, a republic if you can keep it.
I love that.
It is and this comes back to what we talked about. It is our duty and responsibility as citizens in this constitutional republic to keep it.
Yeah.
That means you got to study the Declaration. You got to study the Constitution. You got to stop wanting your ears to be tickled by politicians that are going to tell you what they think you want to hear. You got to stand up and elect people that are going to be leaders, people that are going to be statesmen, people that are going to do what is right by this country. Because if not, totalitarianism doesn't work. Tyranny does not work.
No.
The basis of the United States of America is that the individual is sovereign over the institution of government. And
That's
you are
beautiful,
sovereign as an individual because your rights come from a sovereign Judeo-Christian God.
Yeah.
Your life, your liberty, your property, your pursuit of happiness.
100%.
So I want more people to delve into, get engaged, get involved, and get back to the basics. You know, everything that we do in artillery, there are some basics.
Yeah.
You know, as a Navy SEAL, there's some basics.
100%.
In football, there's some basics.
Absolutely.
Blocking and tackling. We need to get back to the basics of this republic.
I love that. All right. Well, where can people learn more about you and follow you and all of the trials and tribulations that you're going through?
Well, I'm the executive director of the American Constitutional Rights Union. You can follow us at theacru.org. I also have a podcast called Steadfast and Loyal.
Nice.
You can find that on YouTube and Rumble. And I have a Substack page, and you can follow me on the Substack page as well.
Awesome. We'll put all of that in the comments down below. All right, folks. Well, that's a wrap. I want to thank you, sir, for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
It was an honor to have you here. I want to thank the audience. I want to thank the men and women that are holding the line. I want to thank our sponsors. Check out all our previous podcasts by visiting the Bulletproof Workshop. Learn more about me and training opportunities by visiting tridentconcepts.com. Until then, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, and you're listening to the Bulletproof Workshop podcast. Stay safe or be dangerous.